Hi, my name's Mike Watson, and I'm here today with Tom Carlotti, candidate for the magisterial district judge position for Erie of the Erie's 3rd and 4th wards. The primary election is May 16th, and Tom is running on both the Democratic and Republican ballots. Tom, I'd like you to give the voters a chance to get to know you, but before we do that, can you talk a little bit about the office you're running for? What does a district judge do, and what area would you be covering?
Sure, Mike, I'd be proud to. Thank you. The magisterial district judge is the first step in the legal process. They rule on traffic citations, other minor offenses, but they also get involved with more serious offenses like burglary, murder, things like that. In fact, if the police department were to charge someone with a robbery or a burglary or even a murder, they'd have to be arraigned before a district judge for the purpose of posting bond. They then appear again before the district judge a few weeks later at what's called a preliminary hearing. And at that hearing, the police would present limited testimony, and the judge would make a decision as to whether or not the charges should be dismissed or they should be forwarded to court for trial. Now, in addition to those duties, district judges approve arrest and search warrants for the police. They provide emergency protection from abuse orders. They handle landlord-tenant disputes, and they preside over a variety of other issues to include civil matters where less than $12,000 in damages is being sought. Now, as far as the area is concerned that my election would cover, it's the City of Erie's 3rd and 4th wards. Now, traditionally, these wards each had their own district judge. But upon the retirement of longtime 4th Ward District Judge Tom Roby last year, the state merged the two wards. And this will be the first time that the voters get a chance to elect a district judge to represent these newly combined wards. As far as the geographical layout of the area, it's pretty much east-west boundary is from State Street to Pittsburgh Avenue, which is the Mill Creek Township City of Erie line. And then the north-south boundaries go from the Bayfront up to 18th Street and in some areas 21st Street. There is a small section of the 4th Ward, the 1st and 6th districts, that were removed from this jurisdiction and given to the 1st Ward District Judge Sue Mack. And those areas are roughly 3rd Street to the Bayfront, then as far up as 4th Street to the Bayfront, from State Street over to Cranberry.
Thanks, Tom. So how about you? Can you give the voters a bit of information about yourself? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And what type of experience do you have that would make you qualified for this job?
Well, I've lived in Erie my entire life. I was born and raised in Erie. I grew up in the area of 26th and Chestnut Street. I went to Sacred Heart Grade School. I went to Cathedral Prep High School, and I earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in criminal justice from Gannon University. Now, I also obtained a PA teaching certification from Gannon, and I taught school for a couple years as a substitute school teacher in both the Erie and Mill Creek school districts until I got a job as a police officer. I was applying for different law enforcement positions. And I was fortunate to get hired by the Mill Creek Township Police Department in 1982. And then a year later, in '83, I married my wife, Kathleen. We purchased a home in Erie's 4th Ward, and that's where we raised our two daughters who are now adults. As far as experience goes, like I said, I was hired by the Mill Creek Township Police Department in 1982, and I worked there for 32 years. The first 11 years of my career, I was in the patrol division, and that's the uniformed officer out there on a marked patrol car, responding to calls for service, crimes in progress, accident investigations, things like that. The second 11 years of my career, I was a detective. I was a criminal investigator. I worked in both the juvenile and adult crime units. And the last 10 years, I was in various management positions. I worked in every division within a department, and I rose through the ranks to become chief of police, a position I held for 5 years until I retired in 2014. I'm also a 2001 graduate of Gannon's Leadership Erie program. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that when I was deputy chief at the police department, I helped ensure the public's right to fair and impartial law enforcement when I was named the department's first ever internal affairs officer. And then subsequently, when I became chief of police, I spearheaded several different initiatives, one of which was a special investigation unit that allowed us to allocate much needed resources to the ever-increasing drug problem in the greater Erie area. Since retirement, I've been working as an adjunct instructor, part-time job at Mercyhurst University. I teach at the Public Safety Institute at their police academy.
So Tom, that's an impressive, long, and successful career.
Thank you.
So I guess the logical question is, why at this time are you running for district judge?
Well, first and foremost, I wanted my neighbors to have a choice in this election. Secondly, I wanted to restore integrity and competency to this position. You know, I believe that when you're given a position of authority, you have a duty to hold yourself to a higher level, both personally and professionally. And I think that's especially true for judicial positions, since you're going to be sitting in judgment of others. You know, when I served as Mill Creek Township's police chief, I recognized that the public's trust in the legal system was only going to be as strong as the integrity and the competency of the people in charge. And I believe I have something to offer in the way of those attributes. As chief of police, I understood my leadership obligations, and I committed myself to ethical and professional conduct, both on duty and off. If I'm fortunate enough to serve my neighbors as their district judge, that would just be a continuation of that commitment.
So without question, these are qualities necessary in a district judge. Are there others as well?
Yeah, I absolutely believe there are, Mike. They're definitely necessary, and there are, in my opinion, you know, in addition to integrity and competency, I think one of the main things that a good judge needs is a healthy temperament. When I was a police officer, I had an opportunity to interact with a lot of different judges. And the ones that impressed me the most were the ones that really listened to the people. They were patient, they were understanding, and they kept an open mind. You know, far too often, people who are in positions of authority, whether it be a police officer or a judge, I think they sometimes become complacent in the day-to-day routine. Maybe they've heard this type of case or dealt with this type of situation 100 times before, so to them it's more or less old hat. But to you, it may be the first time you've ever had any interaction with the legal system, and it might be the most important issue that you've ever had to deal with. And I think good judges understand and they realize that their decisions have a lasting impact on not only the litigant, but also on the litigant's families far beyond that day in court. I always tried to remember that when I was making decisions as a police officer, and I'll continue to do so if I'm elected district judge.
Thanks, Tom. And I see in my notes that a district judge, a candidate for that position, can cross-file.
Right.
Which means, of course, that they can run on both Republican and Democratic ballots. And I see where both you and your opponent cross-filed. However, your opponent was removed from the Republican ballot due to a successful challenge that you filed. Can you explain why you did that?
Yeah, I was successful in having my opponent removed from the Republican ballot. And Mike, to be perfectly frank, I did it to maintain the integrity of the process. You know, if you want your name to appear on the ballot, the law requires you to meet certain conditions. In this situation, if you want to appear on the Republican ballot, you have to obtain 100 signatures from registered Republicans who live in your district. The same holds true if you want to appear on the Democratic ballot. I think it's important to remember and to understand that it's the voters who give you that privilege to be on the ballot. And you've got to earn that privilege. In my opponent's case, he didn't earn the right. So I felt it would be unfair to the voters and also to the process to give him that opportunity.
Sure. And I'm sure you know your opponent has a very different take on this issue. And I'm going to quote here from the March 25th edition of the Erie Times-News, where he dismissed your objections as technicalities and told the reporter that some of the people who signed his petition told him that they would update their voter registration status later so that it would align with who they wrote down on the petition, but some just simply failed to do so. He also says here that he made a good faith effort when he circulated the petition, so don't you think based on that he should be allowed to stay on the ballot?
Well, you know, Mike, my opponent's statement to the newspaper is troubling on a couple different levels. First of all, what he described as technicalities are the rules. When you sign a political petition in Pennsylvania, you must be a registered member of that party at the time of signing. That's the law. In other words, if someone's signing a Republican nominating petition, they must be a registered Republican when they put their name on the line. They cannot sign if they're any other party affiliation, or if they're an independent, even if they change their voter status later. It is troubling that my opponent permitted this violation of the law. But what's even more troubling is that after my opponent obtained these signatures, he took an oath before a notary. He swore that to the best of his knowledge, the people who signed his petition were registered members of the Republican Party. But based upon his statement to the newspaper, that obviously wasn't true. So in this situation, Mike, it appears to me that one of two things happened. Either my opponent knew the law and he chose not to follow it, or he didn't know the law. Now, either way, that's incredibly disturbing to me, especially since it's coming from someone who's currently making legal decisions and is asking the voters to allow him to continue to do so.
Well, I thank you for that, Tom, and you've stated your position well, my friend. Why don't you just tell the voters why should they vote for you?
Well, we talked about this earlier, Mike, that people that are running for this position, district judge, they can run on both the Republican and the Democratic ballot. And there's a reason for that. Unlike most other political offices, district judges cannot take a stand on any particular issue. They must be non-political and they have to be impartial. Party affiliation should be totally irrelevant. The only thing that should matter is whether the candidate is competent, honest, open-minded, and can make a fair decision. Now, I've lived in Erie's 4th Ward for the past 34 years. I've served the greater Erie area community as a police officer and as a police chief for over 32 years. I have the education, I have the experience, and most importantly, I have the temperament to be a fair, strong, and effective district judge. You know, even though the voters out there may never appear before a district judge, the decisions made by a district judge on a day-to-day basis can have an impact on your life. When violent offenders are released without posting bond, or neighborhood issues are not resolved properly, the community as a whole will suffer. All I can ask the voters is that they compare my background, my experience, my public record, and most importantly, my character with that of my opponent. And after doing so, I'd like them to ask themselves this one question. If I had to go to court, if I were being sued, or if I had to defend myself against criminal charges, which one of these candidates would I trust to make a fair and competent decision? I'm hoping that the voters will see me as that candidate, and I'm respectfully asking for their vote on May 16th. If the voters would like to learn more about me, they can visit my webpage at tomcarlottifordj.com, which also has a link to my committee's Facebook page. Thank you so much for the time, Mike.
And Tom, I want to thank you for putting yourself out there. And folks, it's our turn now, May 16th. Do your homework and exercise your right to vote. Thank you.